Hello, I'm Hazem Seeker. This is Counting the Cost on Al Jazeera, your weekly look at the world of business and finance. This week, bracing for impact. When the US president signed an executive order preventing people from 7 Muslim-majority countries from crossing US borders, the global airline industry was caught by surprise. Find out what other aviation shocks could be in store under the new US administration. One industry that relies on foreign workers is technology. And Silicon Valley executives are mobilizing to oppose the travel ban. But how much power do they have to fight the government on immigration? Plus a shake-up in the French presidential race. But where do the main contenders stand on the economy? And could a Frexit be on the cards? But first, US President Donald Trump's executive order banning citizens from 7 Muslim-majority countries from entering the country sparked protests, chaos, and confusion around the world. It also left the airline industry scrambling. And Doug Parker, the CEO of American Airlines, the world's largest, found himself contradicting the US commander-in-chief this week. Trump blamed the chaos at US airports on protesters and a Delta Airlines computer failure. American Airlines said the turmoil witnessed by its crews and airport teams was all down to Trump. Well, joining me now from London is Peter Morris, Chief Economist at aviation consultancy Flight Global. Thanks very much for being with us. Now, I want to ask you first of all, a number of businesses, of course, were really caught off guard by the travel ban, and perhaps none more so than the airline industry, because they're really on the front lines of this, aren't they? What are some of the ways that they are now having to adjust?
Well, I think the first point is to understand what the rules actually mean, both in terms of current travel and tourism movement and in terms of future travel and tourism movement. So the first thing is clearly there was an element of chaos in knowing who was banned from what and where, and then enforcing that ban in whatever way people interpreted it. What you're now going to see presumably is some degree of clarification, but I think right at the heart of it, to my mind, is the challenge for the US that has a very successful travel and tourism balance of payments surplus of around 100 billion a year. So anything it does to make it harder to get in for people to come and spend money in the States will actually backfire to some extent in reducing the size of that profitable business. And what impact is this having on airlines' costs? Because they're having to do things like refund travelers and reroute some of their staff because some of their citizens are from these countries and they can't put them on flights to the US. I mean, what effect is all of this having? Well, anything that pushes up costs or raises the level of inconvenience reduces the level of travel, and you get two effects then. One of which is the effect that you end up suppressing a certain level of travel, and the other element is diversion. So for example, let's say for Iranian students that were thinking of studying in the US, they may consider that, oh, Germany would be a better bet now. And so all that money that they would have spent on education and on travel will be diverted from one market to another, and other parts of the market will just disappear because people can't travel. And the net impact on the airlines is that they end up with fewer people travelling, and therefore, given that they've got an awful lot of fixed costs in operating services, that their profitability will decline. And beyond the travel ban, what does the aviation industry expect from Trump? Well, there's a big series of questions, and I think they'll go right across the economic spectrum. Certainly the idea of America first has been reached by the airlines themselves years ago, that thought that they had a right to be the dominant partner in any kind of bilateral system between Europe to Asia and so on and so forth. What you're starting to see is that actually a good number of the American airlines have now take part in code shares and tariff immunity agreements with other partners from Asia and from Europe. So it becomes a bit difficult to suddenly start banging the drum for American Airlines first, because it is a global business and people travel with who they want to travel with. So I think some of them may find themselves in a bit of a bind because clearly they've been lobbying about things like, for example, the Exim Bank and the arrangements that Boeing had for selling aircraft overseas. That would, terminating the Exim Bank would have an effect that meant that Boeing was able to sell less aeroplanes worldwide, which wouldn't be a very clever American economic decision. So I think there are all kinds of contradictions starting to bubble to the surface about a theory which is America first and a practice which actually the world is a global market.
And more specifically for American carriers, one of their ongoing concerns is the expansion of Gulf carriers into their markets. They say these airlines like Qatar Airways, Emirates and Etihad and so on enjoy unfair advantages in the form of subsidies, which the US is finding difficult to compete with. Do you see them getting any sympathy or assistance from the Trump administration on this?
I'm sure US-based businesses would have sympathy. The question is what the validity of that is on the world stage, and I've yet to see conclusive evidence that such subsidies do occur, other than through just the kind of natural existence of low rates of income tax, for example, on staff that work for Gulf Airlines. Well, you know, America has certain advantages in other areas regards technology, and other people don't come moaning and complaining about, well, that's unfair. I think that you have to accept with aviation that it is something which determined on a global stage rather than one country has individual rights. So I think that there may well be elements that are brought in that would be a discouragement to Gulf carriers, but I wouldn't feel that other countries in the world would feel those were justified and would think that if that kind of attitude prevails, then it's ultimately going to backfire on the US to make the US a less attractive destination for people internationally to travel to.
And finally, it's been announced that a new route for Qatar Airways Doha to Auckland will be the longest in the world. What effect is that going to have for airlines and their work practices and for passengers?
Well, people have always got excited within the industry about the technical achievement of the longest flight. However, if you actually look at the history of it and you see, for example, the Singapore-New York that was started as a business-only market that was going to change the world, and after a certain time, actually Singapore withdrew that service because the actual economics of flying for 17 hours are very challenging because, first of all, passengers aren't that keen in sitting in a seat for 17 hours, particularly not in economy class. And given the world networks, each year the networks get bigger and bigger, so you can stop at individual points. And for some of us, for example, we might prefer to do 2 8-hour connections together with a kind of 3-hour layover in a lounge in Doha or something. So I think there is a challenge just in terms of the actual product that's delivered, because if you end up the other end of the world after 17 hours and you're not fit for anything for 2-3 days, it's perhaps questionable as to how successful a business model that is. So I think technically it's definitely a big achievement, but the actual either economics or the product experience of it is really rather challenging.
Peter Morris, thanks very much. So 2017 could be the year of the ultra long distance flight and jet lag like you've never seen before. Currently, the world's longest non-stop commercial flight was run by Air India. Pilots clocked up 15,300 kilometers flying from New Delhi to San Francisco. Qatar Airways' new Doha to Auckland link, as we mentioned, will take the prize for the world's longest flight this week. And don't forget Qantas, which is gearing up for non-stop flights between Perth and London. That flight will also take around 17 hours, depending on the weather. All right, still to come on Counting the Cost. Donald Trump has been putting a squeeze on the citrus industry. Find out how he's souring relations with Argentina's lemon growers. First, Trump's clash with Silicon Valley over immigration is likely to get even fiercer. Leaders of the world's biggest tech companies were quick to condemn his immigration restrictions. Jack Dorsey, the CEO of Twitter, Trump's favorite social media tool, tweeted, "The executive order's humanitarian and economic impact is real and upsetting. We benefit from what refugees and immigrants bring to the U.S." Foreign-born entrepreneurs have been key to the success of the global technology industry. Companies rely on being able to tap into a global talent pool. Temporary worker permits for high-skilled workers are known as H-1Bs, and now Trump has indicated he wants to change the rules for these visas as well. Well, joining me now from Boston is Mike Grandinetti. He is the Chief Marketing and Corporate Strategy Officer with Silicon Valley-based data storage company Reduxio. Thanks very much for being with us. So first off then, a lot of concern, of course, in the tech industry about this ban and the effect it is going to have on business. But realistically, what can you do to stop this ban?
Well, I don't know if we can do anything specifically to stop it, but I've been very, very impressed by how rapidly Silicon Valley, Boston, and a lot of the other US tech communities have mobilized. And it's really quite extraordinary to see, because you haven't seen a lot of this activity in the States for 50 years. But from some of the most senior leaders, Tim Cook of Apple, considering suing the Trump administration on constitutional grounds, a lot of the leaders of Google and Microsoft and others being very outspoken that they disagree, and just the rank and file of Silicon Valley, Boston, and other communities literally, protesting in the streets to make it very clear that this is just not something that is acceptable to us. So I've seen the Mass Technology Leadership Council and others, bring together their communities to make sure that our voices are being heard. And that, in the democratic process, is what we're able to do.
And it's no secret, of course, that much of the tech industry supported Hillary Clinton during the presidential campaign. So why should Trump listen to your concerns, given his personality and his penchant for singling out people who didn't support him, if I could put it that way?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. And for better or worse, he is the president of this entire country. He's the president of all of those who did not vote for him. And he's also responsible for keeping our economy healthy and vibrant. And if he had the opportunity to really think about it, he would understand that the vast majority of new job creation and wealth creation in the United States comes from the technology industry. Right? These are the industries that are employing a significant number of people each and every year. Just as one example, only 6 years ago, Amazon had about 30,000 people working for them. Today, they have about 180,000 people working for them. And we can look at similar increases in growth and job creation from Google and Facebook and many others. So to me, that's, if nothing else, he's a businessman, and he should understand that in purely business terms, not even political terms.
It isn't just the travel ban that's a concern for tech, is it? There's also the H-1B visa, which allows skilled foreign workers to work for companies in the U.S. That is something that's going to have huge implications for the tech industry. Do you get the sense that this is going to be a long fight over immigration that's just beginning?
Yeah, and again, there's still a tremendous amount of uncertainty over what might happen with the H-1B. They've hinted at changes, but they haven't really laid out specifics. And that's really right now has them the problem, is that the tech industry has to move forward at internet speed. We've got to move forward with a sense of conviction and purpose. And the uncertainty alone causes a lot of anxiety, and it really begins to slow down the system. So whether you're a non-US passport carrying engineer or scientist or computer programmer, and you're now thinking about your future, you're not quite sure what's going to happen. And as a result of that, you may be more inclined to go back to your home region where you feel that at least you have a sense of certainty about what you might be able to do professionally in the long term. So there's no question that, even in this current state, there's such a level of anxiety amongst those who want to stay in the States, want to work in the Valley or other tech clusters, but aren't quite sure whether they'll be able to and are starting to plan an alternative future for themselves. And that just slows down everything. And it certainly slows down our ability to hire.
From the point of view of Trump and his supporters, though, they say that the too many jobs are going to foreigners at the expense of Americans. So whether or not that is true, what's wrong with trying to get companies to hire more Americans?
Here's what I would say to that, Hazem. You know, when you look at the world that I've lived in for 25 plus years, the world of advanced venture capital backed tech startups, venture capitalists invest in tech startups based on really one primary factor: how good is the team? And as we run startups, the team is everything. And so if I'm competing with some of the largest, most well-funded, most well-capitalized companies on the planet, the only advantage I have is to be able to hire the best and the brightest. And so to me, what's wrong with that is I think it's important that we have the freedom to hire whoever we feel is going to contribute the most to the role that we are hiring for.
Now, Uber CEO Travis Kalanick has told employees he is quitting Trump's Business Advisory Council. Uber customers and drivers staged an online boycott over the ride-hailing company's handling of an airport taxi strike in the wake of Trump's travel ban. The hashtag #DeleteUber was created and more than 200,000 customers had deleted their accounts. Now, the two front-runners in the French presidential election race are both facing allegations of misusing public money. Far-right leader Marine Le Pen and conservative candidate François Fillon deny the claims. Natasha Butler has more from Paris.
For weeks, he's been the front-runner in France's presidential race. Now Conservative candidate François Fillon is fighting to stay in it. A French newspapers published new allegations that Fillon paid his wife Penelope for a fake job as his parliamentary assistant and employed his children to do legal work for which they weren't fully qualified. In all, $1 million of public money. Fillon says he's the victim of a smear campaign by left-wing rivals and accused the socialist government of trying to topple him.
I chose to be a candidate in the presidential election, and when you make that choice, you can't complain about the violence of the attacks. You have to accept them and face them as part of our democratic system. One thing I can tell you is that I will face them to the end. I will be a candidate in this election.
French politicians in parliament reacted to the growing scandal.
All the candidates are being screened, and today is the hour of François Fillon, and tomorrow it will be the hour of Mr. Macron and Mrs. Le Pen and Mr. Mélenchon. This is the way the campaign are evolving today.
It's not the good behavior for a man running for the presidential election who have the first duty to respect the institution of the same republic.
French investigators are looking into the case. Fillon says he will clear his name, but the scandal is already taking its toll on his image as an honest politician. Opinion polls suggest his popularity is plummeting, and there's already talk of him stepping down.
It just seems like if, let's say, the polls, for example, continue to show that he can't even make it to the second round anymore, his party might just decide that maybe even if this is very close to the presidential election, it might be a better bet to try and put somebody else up.
Far-right leader Marine Le Pen is also battling for her reputation. A European MP, she's accused of using nearly $350,000 of EU parliamentary money to pay her political party staff in France. Like Fillon, she blames a dirty tricks campaign. Until now, opinion polls show the Conservative candidate François Fillon meeting Marine Le Pen of the far right in the second and final round of the presidential election. But with the allegations of the misuse of public funds hanging over both of them, their chances could be diminished, and that could mean the race for the Élysée could open up. Emmanuel Macron quit the government last year to form his own independent party. Young and relatively inexperienced, few people thought he could defeat France's main parties. But his popularity is rising, and so are his chances of winning.
Now, the first round of French presidential elections will be held on April 23rd. I caught up with Philippe Wichte, head of economic research with Paris-based Natixis Asset Management. I asked him where the main candidates stand on the economy and who's put forward the boldest proposals.
Well, it's complicated because we currently do not have all the programs. We have some issues from François Fillon of the right, of the Conservative Party. We have some news from the Socialist Party with Benoît Hamon, who will be the candidate. We have elements from Emmanuel Macron at the center, but we do not have anything clearly from Marine Le Pen, the extreme right party, who is supposed to be at the second round of this election. So it's still we still have an incomplete view, and the question will be interesting to see how they focus on jobs. Clearly, the Parti Socialiste, Benoît Hamon, will be the candidate. Suppose that jobs will not be plentiful in coming years. So that's why he proposed a kind of revenue, specific revenue for all. Emmanuel Macron and François Fillon expect being able to boost jobs. And with Marine Le Pen, we don't know, because she wants to exit from the Eurozone, from the European Union. And we don't know exactly what are her proposal on this point, clearly, and it could have very negative impact on the French economy. So that's the picture we can have currently.
And finally, Donald Trump's not just banning people. Imports of lemons from Argentina are also being hit. The White House has intervened to stop the lifting of a 15-year-long ban on the citrus fruit. Teresa Bo has more.
The province of Tucumán is the heart of Argentina's lemon industry. Thousands of hectares of them getting ready to be exported to the United States for the first time in over a decade. But a few days ago, the new U.S. administration put Argentine lemon exports on hold.
We have taken all the sanitary measures so that our lemons can make it to the U.S. Everything was ready. We are worried because we have worked a lot to be allowed back in the U.S. market. Lots of people depend on the lemon here.
15 years ago, the U.S. banned Argentine lemons because of concerns they carried disease. But that changed last month when the U.S. Department of Agriculture decided the lemons could be safely imported. A few days ago, the White House announced a 60-day delay on the decision.
Our countries are part of the World Trade Organization, and there is a protocol signed. It is an agreement that cannot be changed if someone wakes up in a bad mood. This is an issue for the Foreign Office.
Argentina is one of the world's top lemon exporters. It is an industry that employs around 50,000 people only here in the province of Tucumán. And it was getting ready to expand because of the possibility of exporting once again to the United States. This sudden 60-day suspension has many people worried about what's coming next.
During the administration of former center-left President Cristina Fernández de Kirchner, relations with the U.S. were tense.
Ladies and gentlemen.
But that changed over a year ago, when businessman turned politician Mauricio Macri took office. Argentina is in talks to regain preferential tariff status with the U.S., as well as resume beef exports. Macri is also trying to attract foreign investment to get Latin America's third biggest economy out of recession.
Everything is uncertain now. We are going to see how this affects the exports of beef, biodiesel, wines. We are going to see more protectionism from the United States, probably establish more sanitary measures to reduce imports. All of this doesn't help us.
For now, President Donald Trump's first measures have put everyone here on alert. Although these lemons are still exported to other parts of the world, many here were looking forward to the opportunity to trade with the North.
And that is our show for this week, but there's more for you online at aljazeera.com/CTC. That'll take you straight to our page, which has individual reports, links, and entire episodes for you to catch up on. You can also get in touch with us by tweeting me at Hazem Seeker, and do use the hashtag AJCTC when you do, or drop us an email. Counting the cost at aljazeera.net is our address. That's it for this edition of Counting the Cost. I'm Hazem Seeker from the whole team here. Thanks for joining us. The news on Al Jazeera is next.